Reverend Paraman Barsel has been a disciple of Sri Swami Satchidananda since 1976. He has served 1970. Oh, sorry, yeah. He has served as president of Yogaville West, the Washington D.C. IYI, New York IYI, and Yogaville East in Connecticut, and has served on the board of trustees and spiritual life board of Satchidananda Ashram, Yogaville, Virginia, and was co-coordinator of the Lotus dedication. Paraman was the editorial consultant on Inside the Yoga Sutras by Reverend Jagannath Carrera as well. He has also served on several Sri Swami Satchidananda's works, including the Yoga Sutras of Patanjali. He has also helped to design the first integral yoga Hatha Basic Teacher Training Program, and many, many more. So without further delay, please enjoy the treasured stories with Paraman Barsel.
Thank you, Vyasa. It's wonderful to see everyone. It seems so appropriate that we're doing this in July, which is of course, Guru Purnima month. And it also seems very appropriate that we have 4 basic Guru slokas that we use in morning meditation, and we have 4 sessions. So we'll start each of our sessions with one of the Guru slokas. So Vyasa is going to share that on the screen right here in the beginning, in case you don't have it in front of you. And for this first session, we'll do the first one. We'll do it together, not responsively. So if you, nobody's going to be able to hear you, so don't worry about whether you got the pronunciation right. But we can feel it together, and we'll do it first in Sanskrit and then in English. Guru Brahma, Guru Vishnu, Guru Devo Maheshwara, Guru Sakshat Param Brahma, Tasmai Shri Gurave Namah. The Guru creates, the Guru preserves. The Guru dissolves the universe. The Guru, in fact, is the Absolute. Salutations to the Satguru. Ready for a story? The first story will be that when I chant that, I remember doing it in Shivananda Hall, not that many yards from here, years ago, when I was had the honor of giving a tribute to Gurudev in his presence. And you get to stand at the little podium that a lot of you have stood at or are very familiar with. And Gurudev is sitting in his chair a few feet away, which is quite an experience to give a talk or an announcement or anything whatsoever, much less a tribute to him. And I got to, the great thing about it is you get to do whatever you want. And on one of those occasions when I gave a tribute, I chose to start with that sloka, the one that we just did, Guru Brahma, Guru Vishnu. And it was truly one of the greatest experiences of my life to go deep within and chant that with his physical form a few feet away in front of me. I think on that occasion, I might have followed that by saying, I know I have said this when I give tributes, that I said, well, it's a daunting task to say anything about Gurudev, but I'm completely undaunted because it's impossible to do any justice to him, so nothing to worry about. And I'll take that attitude towards these stories. If I'm not able to convey their greatness, the fault just lies with me as the storyteller. Why we're conveying them, though, I think is captured in a number of ways. And maybe my favorite name for Gurudev stories is the name that Bhaktan Eberle chose for his little collection. It's been in a lot of different versions over the years. I have like an original hand-bound version, and I think he's completely rewritten, and I don't think the final new version is out because Bhaktan is always perfecting things. But he calls them, his collection of stories, teaching events. Teaching events. I love that, because every single encounter with Gurudev, to me, was a teaching event. And he taught in many ways. He taught through laughter. He taught through love. He taught through looking through you to the other side of the universe. Nod if you know what I'm talking about. Yeah, I know a lot of you know exactly what I'm talking about. That's quite an experience to be seen that way. So the other best way I would characterize these, besides teaching events, is initiations. The holiest of holy things that we receive from a beloved teacher, certainly in my case, is initiation. You know, in mantra initiation, you receive a holy mantra that can do everything that you would ever need. But the secret is that every interaction with him was an initiation. Initiation can be by word, it can be by thought, it can be through a dream, it can be through touch, it can be unfathomable ways. And to me, every single one of these stories was an initiation. So let's start. And I haven't put these, I have over 90 stories, so I don't know if we'll get to all of them in the 4 sessions. We may do more sessions after these. Let's see how it goes. And since it's not a lecture, and normally I love question and answer and discussion and story circles where everyone tells their stories. But the idea here is to try to record as many of these as possible and revel in them together. And I'm hoping that they are sparking lots of stories that are happening in your life right now, memories, being touched by the divine every second of your life. All of this is available to all of you. So this isn't a time for you to sit there and say, oh, why couldn't I have been there for that? Or I didn't get to be there when Gurudev was in the body. None of that restricts you whatsoever, not even a little bit. You know, the example I always use is St. Francis of Assisi, probably one of Jesus' greatest disciples of all time. And he came by over 1,000 years after Jesus walked the earth in the form that people know of from the Gospels. So it's all available to you on any number of levels. So starting at the beginning in my lifetime that I know of, because there may be a lot of secret visitations, but on an everyday level, I'll say that in 1969, I was an undergraduate at Columbia University, and I was, I think, in my 3rd or 4th year, and I saw a poster saying that Swami Satchidananda, of course, I didn't know how to pronounce that, of the Integral Yoga Institute, was going to give a talk at the chapel on campus, St. Paul's Chapel, right in the, in the big quad in the center of the campus. And I just saw the word yoga, because for a number of years, so integral yoga, so that jumped out at me, because for a number of years, I'd been dabbling and reading and really fascinated with anything I could lay my hands on, not just hatha yoga. It was all from books up to that point. So very theoretical knowledge, trying to do a little bit of practice. So I said, oh, this sounds interesting, a yoga talk in this beautiful old Gothic chapel. So I'll go. It was evening. There was a riot going on outside, which I and folks close to me had eagerly participated in the first student riots about half a year or a year earlier. We were like the first wave, quite proud of being in the first wave of campus occupations to end the Vietnam War and to various other worthy causes, mainly that. But it had degenerated on this particular night into basically a mob that was breaking windows as much as possible on the campus, with the idea that this was going to hurt the administration. So they were throwing bricks and rocks, and there was the sound of shattering glass and the sound of a mob roaring in protest and anger. Not really a focused, effective protest, I don't think. So I had done my time with that much earlier, and I decided I'll go in and hear this talk. So I walked in and I entered a scene that it was like entering a science fiction movie, outer space. I had no idea what was going on, and I was by myself. Friends and and others that I knew, there was nobody there with me, which intensified the experience, because there were hundreds of people, and you have that feeling of walking into a party where you don't know anyone. And these crowds of people were coming forward when Swami Satchidananda walked in the long orange robes and the big flowing beard and long hair. Well, I had no idea what to expect, what he looked like or anything. And it was so impressive. And people were falling at his feet and rushing up to him and hugging him, giving him flowers. And I'm, bright fellow, I'm trying to compute what's happening here. What have I stumbled upon? But I figured it out completely. I said, okay, he's been gone for a long time, probably overseas. And these people are seeing him for the first time in a long, long time. And that's why they're carrying on like this. So I at least I understood exactly what was happening, little knowing that this is the way he was greeted wherever he went every day. Imagine leading that life where everyone is rushing at you with love, or possibly rushing in the other way to avoid getting nailed for some mistake if you were a little closer of a disciple. So I went in and sat and listened to the talk. And the main thing I'll tell you about that talk that I remember very well is that there was the sound of the mob outside. So that was like, I don't know whether you can hear that over Zoom, but this roaring sound, muffled a little bit by the closed doors and windows, and the sound of shattering glass. So the is punctuated by. So picture these sound effects, and he's peacefully giving this talk that could have been the Buddha or the Sermon on the Mount. It was timeless truth from the ages. And after he talked for quite a while, someone stood up and asked a question politely, and he received it that way. And they said, yes, but isn't it selfish? You're saying that selflessness is the way, but isn't it selfish to look for peace within when there's such pressing matters, roar of the crowd, shattering glass outside, that need our attention. How can we take the time to do that? And Gurudev just calmly said, well, it's like this. A man is walking back to his car a long ways. His car's run out of gas, so he's gone and gotten a gas can. But it's a very deserted stretch of road. He doesn't see anybody else around, but he sees a house in this deserted stretch, and the house is on fire. And he rushes over and he looks for a hose. He looks for a bucket. He looks for some water because he sees that the house is going to be lost if something isn't done immediately. And he can't find, and he's calling for help. No one is around to answer. There's no water. There's no hose. There's nothing he can do. He's saying, but something has to be done or the house is going to be destroyed. So in frustration, he just takes the can of gasoline and throws it on the fire. He says, if you go out to save the world without finding the peace within, you will just be more fuel, adding more fuel to the flames, punctuated by the sound of an angry mob and the breaking glass outside. So here is the effect that this had on me. Speaking of teaching events, I spent the next 6 months or so cornering people and telling them about that talk. And what I would always preface my remarks with was, I would say, oh yeah, I saw this Swami Satchidananda. I wasn't very impressed. I would always say that. I wasn't very impressed. Here's what he said. And then I would go quoting from that talk. Okay. This is very typical of the way my ego, at least, I won't say everyone's, tries to defend itself. And I always liken this whole experience to there's a tradition in India that you can bring a coconut to the teacher representing your ego on your birthday. And he'll break the coconut or some other, auspicious occasion. He'll break the coconut. And we actually used to do this with Gurudev in the early years until he said, stop bringing coconuts. We used to bring a coconut and a hammer and a bowl and a towel. And he would tap the coconut, to find the sweet spot. So it would be this little light tap, 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 boom. And it would break perfectly in half, and you would see the beautiful white coconut inside representing the purified ego. That was the idea, is that you were shattering the rough, hairy, exterior selfish ego and revealing your polished. So this first experience and the next few I'll tell you, I take as being that tap, 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 and then bam, which we'll get to in a moment. So even though these stories aren't in chronological order, these first few are. So the second time that I know of that I saw him was in the Virgin Islands. I had just graduated from Columbia. Somehow I actually graduated during these tumultuous times with, occupations of the dean's office and all kinds of carrying on. But we all managed to graduate somehow, most of us. And I had lined up a job in the U.S. Virgin Islands in St. Thomas. I was going to go down there because I had visited and it seemed really nice. And the job was for the fall. So, you graduate in May. So I had absolutely no money to live on until this teaching job started. So I was going to teach high school or something. They were desperate enough to just hire anybody in those days. But it was, the economy was depressed. This was around 1970. And it was very hard to get a job. And it was very hard for the folks who lived there to get a job. So I went to about over 300 different places. I counted them, which is interesting because later on I went to over 300 places in the first IYI I lived in to get a job to pay off my college debts. But that's another story. So I finally got a line on a job, but it was way up in the hills. You know, these are volcanic mountains. And a cab driver, most of the folks down there had very little money, and a cab driver was not making a lot of money down there. He drove me way up into the hills, not like a typical cab drive around, you know, the port city, Charlotte, Amalie, where all the, you know, the tourist boats would come in. But this was way off the beaten path. And he was driving me for about 20 minutes up these steep, you know, mountain winding roads. And there was something wonderful about him. And he was asking me about my experiences and trying to get a job and this and that. And he finally got me to my destination where I was to report for a possible job. And he turned to me, and I was sitting in the back, and he turned from the front seat, and his eyes looked through me, and they were bright. And I, of course, only in retrospect knew that this was Gurudev coming out of this very, very dark, black-brown face with this radiant smile and these radiant eyes. And he just turned to me and he said, ask and it shall be given. Seek and ye shall find. Knock and the door will be opened. He smiled radiantly, and I said, I was stunned. And of course, Gurudev quoted that frequently. And I said, well, how much do I owe you? You know, because this is a long trip. And he said, you don't owe me anything. He said, I get more than enough reward out of just serving you. It is a joy to serve you. So that was the second tap, which of course I didn't know that it was. I recognized all of this later. Then those plans didn't work, and just kind of going completely based on unseen forces, but I didn't know that I was basing it on unseen forces. I thought I was just following logic. Let's go to San Francisco. That sounds like the place to go in 1970, you know? I'm an urban boy, and I want to be in a city, but it should be somewhere really nice and warm. And San Francisco sounds, I've never been there. I have no money. I have to drive cross country in what was called a drive-away car, where you're delivering somebody's car for them, which is what you do if you're, you know, fairly penniless. And did that, got out to San Francisco, looked around after getting off the interstate, and it comes out into a nasty part of town. And I said, well, this doesn't seem nice. Then I saw the sign for the Bay Bridge to Berkeley. Oh, that looks interesting. Let's go there. So that's how I ended up in Berkeley. And after settling in Berkeley with, you know, the last few dollars that were left, I wanted to continue to follow that interest in yoga. So I walked over to the Berkeley campus and I said, where are there yoga classes? Are there yoga classes here that are open to the public? Or do you have, you know, some idea where I can get a yoga class somewhere here in town? And they opened in those days, they opened a little metal file box, and it had 3x5 cards inside, and they flipped through them to look for activities. And in the back, there under Y for yoga, they pulled out this 3x5 card that had turned yellow with age, and it said there is a class in yoga. It's given at the Grove Street Baptist Church at such and such a time, 7:30 at night. So for several weeks, quite unaccountably, I walked miles across town because the car was delivered, had no transportation or anything, no money anymore for cabs or buses or anything like that. And I would walk miles across town to the Grove Street Baptist Church, came up to the church that first night when the class time was, and you could see a chain draped around the doors to the church from the outside, a big thick chain, and it was completely dark inside, and you'd knock on the door, no one responded. It was totally obvious that it was locked up tight as a drum. And for some reason, I'd just sit on the steps with nothing better to do and just wait. Maybe it said 7:30, maybe it's later. It wasn't really logical. And did this over and over again, almost every night for several weeks. So that wasn't a sighting of Gurudev, but it was, they say that in Zen temples, and Gurudev used to talk about that too, quite a number of times over the years. I would hear him refer to, how, we just let folks into an ashram so easily these days. But in those days, if you went to the Zen monastery, you would have to sit outside the locked gates and just wait, and in all kinds of weather, and show your level of interest. So I think that was an important step. So the third time I saw Gurudev was back to the familiar form, but not exactly familiar yet to me, that's for sure. I neglected to say that after going to that church for weeks and it being locked up, and obviously that card, yellowed with age, had nothing to do with anything that was going on currently, the San Francisco IYI decided to offer some Hatha yoga. We didn't know what the IYI, me and my friends in those days, even was, but there was yoga again. Didn't remember that had anything to do with that lecture. Started going, they were going to offer some classes, and they were looking for a place to do them, and come to a meeting, and couldn't come to the meeting, but somehow got the phone number to them. And they said, we met, we found a place, we're going to be able to offer classes on thus and such days at the Grove Street Baptist Church. So yeah, he's asking it shall be given, seek and ye shall find, knock and the door will be open. We literally knocking on the door, so the locked door. So after going to many, many classes, the first silent retreat was offered. It was definitely the first on the West Coast. And it was in the Santa Cruz Mountains. And lots of us who had no transportation, they chartered some buses. So they chartered some old school buses, and a busload and maybe several, I can't remember how many buses were sitting in front of the San Francisco IYI on 770 Dolores, which is in the Mission District, up on this hill. And above the hill is essentially like a castle out of a storybook castle. That's the San Francisco IYI. I mean, it's got a turret and a cupola. It might as well be like another loaded, a cross between a storybook castle and maybe Lotus to boot. And we're parked way down on the street. There's many, many steps that wind up just to get to the first level of the main level. Gurudev comes out of the door. Of course, we didn't call him Gurudev in those days. I didn't even know to call him Swamiji, really. and busload of people sitting outside. He comes out onto that landing, and this is where it gets strange, because it seemed as if he looked at us from the landing way, way up above. But it also seemed like he walked down a lot of those flights of steps to get a closer look at us. And it also seemed to some present like his face was floating right outside of the windows of the bus. This was all to uninitiated testimony, or uninitiated, or were we being initiated at that time? In any case, what I remember most about it is that his head kept turning side to side slowly, and it looked like one of those radar antennas that you'll see in movies, right? It looked like a big radar antenna. And he kept sweeping the bus and looking all of us through the windows of the bus in the eyes. And after a while, he receded. The bus left for the retreat. And I turned to the person next to me and said, I think I've just gotten this is the first words I've spoken after being scanned. I said, I've just gotten a really good idea about how to take this retreat, because no one had been on a retreat before, as far as I knew, in this whole group. I just got a really good idea how to take this retreat. We should go and just surrender completely to the experience and not judge anything, and just put that judging side of the mind completely aside, experience everything fully, drink it all in, and then later on, if we want, we could discuss it, we could analyze it, or whatever. So that's what happened on the second. That's the third tap, and then the one that cracked the shell was arriving at the retreat, fourth time seeing Gurudev that I know of in this lifetime. And I remember sitting on the floor of this big barn-like, very beautiful structure where there was a big stage where he would give talks. And he gave talks outside and inside, morning and night. He actually led morning meditation before dawn, up there in the mountain air, crisp air. It was amazing. There was so much contact with him. It was incredible. But I remember that very first talk, this was the fourth time, sitting on the floor, looking up at the stage, and he came and sat cross-legged and to address us. And I looked up and I said, "Oh, there is a God." So that was tap, 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 boom, cracked open. And I should say that to add significance to that I had flirted with atheism quite a bit in my high school days and college days. I wasn't fully committed atheist, but I definitely had no strong background of faith in my upbringing, and was even proud of that. So that was over. And here's what happened after that. I mentioned that all of these contacts are initiations. I guess there's no way to say this without just saying it. On that retreat, right from the beginning, I received like a spontaneous mantra initiation. And one of the universal mantras that we all know and chant to this day just started repeating itself in my head and continued to do so for the entire 5 days of this silent retreat. And when I say continuous, it was day and night, and it was effortless. If I woke up, first thing in the morning in the bunk bed in the cabins, it was a summer camp, the mantra would be going. When I went to, take a shower or brush my teeth in the morning, the mantra would be going. When I went to breakfast, hatha yoga, whatever, the mantra would be going completely effortlessly and beautiful. And I didn't know this mantra at all. I may have heard it in some of those many classes back at the Grove Street Baptist Church, but I definitely didn't particularly know it. A very auspicious mantra, by the way, and one that I love deeply today, which features in another one of the stories, but I'm going to save that other story for later. So those were the beginning times. And the result of that, by the way, was that I was in complete, again, I hesitate in a way to say this because it almost sounds like bragging to me, even, by today's standards, definitely for me. But I was in complete bliss for the entire 5 days and for weeks afterward, continuously. It never stopped. And when I say bliss, I don't mean that I was spaced out at all. I was just supremely, transcendently peaceful and joyous under all circumstances, under all conditions the whole time. So apparently that's what the Guru does with somebody like me. I take it that he took a look at me and said, well, first of all, he found me and harvested me. I feel like we talk about finding your guru, and the real truth is that the guru goes around finding us and picking us up around the world. So he put me in his little basket, and I think when he took a look at me, he said, well, this one, I've got to really hook him, really, really strongly so that he can't run away. I apologize. This is the hardest thing about doing this for me, is to look at the camera instead of looking at all of your faces. So if it seems like I'm looking down, it's because I'm not used to this Zoom format, even after the many Zooms this year. At the end of that retreat, by the way, at the closing program, we used to have what Gurudev, I don't know whether he did it on that very first retreat, but most of the retreats that I attended certainly through the early to mid 70s, Gurudev would say, it's Saturday night. I'm pretty sure it happened on this first retreat. He said, tomorrow is Saturday night. You know what that means? And he went, freak out night, like that. And we would all go wild. And freak out night was basically, it was a chance for us to really blow off steam at the end of the silent retreat. And there were lots and lots of offerings. People would dance and sing. And I used to write poetry quite a bit. So my part of the freak out night was reciting 5 poems, and that I had come during the retreat. One of them wound up in the Integral Yoga magazine, the little magazine back in those days, an actual print magazine, and and it was, I think it had the title, Blessed Are We. And the refrain was, blessed are we, for we have seen God in our midst. So I did my little poetry reading, and some of them were quite funny. That last one was the climactic one, and it was just purely devotional. I never would have thought myself, a devotional type at all, but obviously I was. And at the end of the retreat, Gurudev hugged me. Different people were getting a chance for a hug, and he hugged me and he said, it seems to me that he whispered in my ear more or less, and he said, a beautiful poet and humorous too, like that. And here's what's interesting about that. Several things are interesting about that. The main thing is that I never wanted to be a beautiful poet. I wanted to be a great poet. So there was a part of me that was fully crazy enough to hear this from the master, a beautiful poet, and be disappointed in that microsecond. Yeah, I don't want to. What do you mean beautiful? It should be great. I want to be Samuel Beckett. I don't want to be beautiful. I want to be some grim existentialist that's like practically dead. That had been my aspiration for a long time. To lie on my back staring at the ceiling. That's what I fantasized was the life of these folks. Turns out even these existentialists had completely different lives than my fantasy version of them. But yeah, he didn't say great. He said beautiful and humorous too. And here's what's interesting about that. I think of myself as being very humorous. Those of you who've known me all these years, you know that I love to laugh and I love to tell jokes. And we've had big joke-telling parties in our living room, along with big Gurudev story circles for years and years and years here at Yogaville. And I always fancied myself really funny. But my best friend from high school, who didn't take this integral yoga journey with us, years later, when we reconnected, he said, after a long, many years not seeing one another, he said, oh, I see that you got your sense of humor back. So it was his perception that I had become very serious. And I thought, nonsense. He just doesn't know. I never lost my sense of humor. And then somebody else who knew me extremely, extremely well, in the integral yoga Sangha, said to me, also in the early 70s, after a few years after this occasion, when did you become so funny? So I thought I was always funny. Apparently not. So that was an initiation, and humorous too. And I missed the point because I was busy worrying about being great instead of beautiful. Meanwhile, he was initiating me into that humor. So, like I said, in no particular order, but here's another story from those early Berkeley days. We would often have these teaching events, meeting Gurudev at airports. He was coming or going from somewhere. We would crowd into the airport waiting area to see him off or to see him in or, greet him. And on this one occasion, I was late to the airport. We knew the gate to go to. We knew that there, would be probably a scene at the gate because a few of these wonderful occasions that occurred earlier. And walking towards the gate, it was a little late, and I was worried about arriving late, but I was also talking about my state of mind to the person I was with, and I said, I just feel so hard-hearted. I just can't I can't cry. I wish I could, I just wish I could cry. And I can't. So that was my state of mind as we're rushing to get there a little late. We turn the corner, come down some long corridor, and come to the waiting area where Gurudev is with a crowd of devotees. You know, you have to picture all these 20-somethings and teenager, you know, flower children, yogis sitting right on the floor in the airport. Gurudev sitting on a chair, you know, seemingly like holding court, or you don't know what. But we come around the corner, and that whole scene is there, and there must be 50, 70, 100 people maybe sitting around him, crowded all around him. But it all falls very silent just as we're arriving. And it had that feeling, if you walk into a room, or you've seen this in movies, if it's never happened to you, and everyone suddenly stops talking because they're talking about you, you know, it's like suddenly like there's a silence. And in that split second, you go like, what? Something's going on here, but you don't know what it is, as Bob Dylan said, right? And in that moment, I'm on the circumference of this circle of people seated on the floor, and I had brought, I had heard from Gurudev's secretaries that he liked cashews. So I had a bag of cashews to give him. A number of times over the years, you know, you would get hints from Gurudev's secretaries and of good gifts to bring. So I had my bag of cashews. So we rounded the corner, everyone's silent and looking at us strangely. And I come to the perimeter of the folks and I say, I have something for you. So this all happens real fast. I'm slowing it down. But when I say I have something for you, because I want to, and everyone kind of seems to be waiting for something, at that moment, Gurudev, from his side, I can't show you this real well, but my hand is going down to my hip. From a concealed position right next to his side, his hand goes down, and in one swift motion, up comes a brightly colored plastic water pistol, and he fires it at me. So it's like this, boom, in one motion, just boom, like the fastest quick draw you would ever see in a Western. And in one motion, it comes up. I'm standing at least 20, I would say maybe even 30 feet away. A water pistol, a little water pistol. He shoots it. It hits me right exactly in the third eye. And then it trickles down inside my eye like tears running down my face. So I arrived saying, I wish I could cry. I see this strange silence, this strange stare, and boom, I have something for you. That was the exchange. I have something for you. And then he received great, you know, you know how he would receive an offering with both hands so beautifully. Every moment and movement was beyond being a teaching. It was like a ballet of the spirit. And he took the bag of nuts and he looked inside and he said, Berkeley nuts. The Berkeley nuts. He always called us the Berkeley nuts. And we had a wild, wild institute in those days. Like I said, most of us, you know, you can imagine a bunch of 20-year-olds pretty clueless about any discipline aspect. All we knew was we had tremendous enthusiasm for what we were about. So the Berkeley nuts. Yeah, that water pistol shot stands out in my mind amongst the miracles I've witnessed as being one of the greatest. I'm more impressed by something like that could actually could be actually physically done than things that seem, supernatural, which there were quite a few of. So I'm going to just turn to something random just for the fun of it and see what comes up. One Father's Day, years later, in the Connecticut ashram, I got to be at that podium again in front of Gurudev, and he was present in his chair, big gathering to celebrate Father's Day with him. And I decided I like to do, audience participation things to keep folks awake and involved. And, you don't have to give too much of a talk. So I started, I said, we're going to take the word Father and just from wherever you are, just shout out, different attributes of Gurudev, our great spiritual father, for each letter. So F goes out and people are, saying, fantastic. And, you go ahead, imagine them right now in your own mind. And so lots of different examples of F are coming, beautiful, all beautiful. A is, is for Ananda and amazing and, whatever else, lots of good ideas. And so then we come to T, and people say a few beautiful attributes starting with a T. And that's when Gurudev decides to speak up for the first time. And he's in this game, because by now people are really into it and they're shouting from all over the hall. And Gurudev goes, how can I do this without totally giving it away? Well, he says something, in that deep rolling voice of his. And I want to repeat it for everyone because he's not on a microphone. And I can't tell what he just said. So I say, excuse me, Gurudev? And he says it again, a little louder. And I said, I'm sorry. And now I'm really getting uncomfortable. I'm sorry, Gurudev, I didn't quite get that. What? And he says it again. And then it must have been 4 or 5 times until I was just completely squirming. And he's going, terror. Terror. And he's saying terror, Terror, with the rolling R's and the Tamil English accent. So then when I finally get it, it's like, oh, terror, what I'm feeling right now, which is quite appropriate because, when they talk about the fear of God, we all want everything to be butterflies and rainbows, but the ego, the selfish ego knows that terror is quite appropriate. Of course, he was the only one who gave an attribute that didn't sound, totally sweet and complimentary. I mentioned miracles like the water pistol, but I'll give a few that are, that are more like cities, but they're just as cute. And kind of fun sorts of things. He wasn't into showing off any supernormal powers, so they would be kind of done in a gentle, very playful way. So in those early California days, we had something called Meeting of the Ways, where a big ecumenical gathering of teachers of a lot of different traditions. And we were in this big barn, and it had been, decorated by devotees for the big occasion with balloons and banners and this and that. And it was a big barn with very high up rafters and open. And one of the banners, the tape or tacks that were holding up the end, one of the ends of this long banner that must have been 30 feet long, I can't remember what it said. It could have been truth is one, paths are many, or something like that. One of the ends had come loose and was starting to fall down. It had folded over and was hanging down quite a ways. And one of the most interesting powers that Gurudev had, he had this invisibility act that he could do, where if he wanted to, all the people who were crowding around him, including people attending to him and really conscientiously serving him, would just disappear for a moment. You know, it's like there would be this big space around him and nobody would be paying attention to him. And that's what happened, because he did something that no one would have, in their right mind, none of his attendants would have let him do. And he didn't interact with them and push them away. There was a huge step ladder, not an extension ladder, but, you know, step ladder, a tall step ladder is what, you know, 12 feet, 18 feet. This was as tall as you could have a step ladder. It was wooden, it was rickety, and it was tall enough to reach up to these high rafters. And no one was around him, and no one stopped him. And I can't remember whether he moved the ladder. It seemed to just be in the right place. I don't remember him moving it. So that was he had this ability to make these miracles seem like nothing was happening. Nothing's happening. Nothing to see here. Don't look over. Nobody was looking. And he climbed up the ladder and he reached up to reattach the fallen end of the banner. And then he stretched, you know, gracefully and fully to the full extent that you could stretch with one arm. And the whole side and the leg and everything, way up this rickety old ladder. And he was maybe 4 or 5 feet short, literally 4 or 5 feet short of being able to reach it. And then with apparently nobody noticing, I didn't hear anyone go, ooh or ah or what's happening or anything. It was just like he was invisible. But I watched, and his body stretched like a cartoon or something. I can't quite convey this because it didn't look odd. That was the whole point. It didn't look odd, but it just kept stretching and stretching and stretching and stretching for that last 4 to 5 feet very easily. He grabbed the end of the banner, he reattached it, he came down the ladder. There was nobody to greet him. I don't think there was even anybody holding the ladder. I mean, there should have been a gaggle of people around saying, Swamiji in those days, don't go up the ladder. No, nothing. So he would do these disappearing acts. I love that. He could do that at the drop of a hat. And then you get miracle references when Lotus was being built and there was to be gold on the cupola, on the spire, and people were donating their gold wedding rings and jewelry and things to be melted down. And we were standing talking to Gurudev, and somebody said something like, you know, don't they, half jokingly, they said, you hear people talk about, you know, being able to transmute the base elements like in alchemy and things like that, and you hear yoga cities like that. And he said, oh yeah, that could easily be done. We could just materialize the gold we need, and we could materialize, you know, we could materialize enough so that it would pay for the whole shrine. Because we were doing, you know, like fundraising dinners, which I'll tell you a story about in a moment, and all these sort of the equivalent of, you know, selling brownies or lemonade on the street to try to raise a few $1 million to build a shrine. And he said, yeah, he said we could easily do that. He said, but what fun would that be? Just very matter-of-factly. Yeah. And I don't know whether this counts as a a miracle story or not, but I see Brahma Rosenberg there. When we lived in the Connecticut ashram, which is where Lotus was originally going to be, on this lake that Tyaga, later Tyagananda, our beloved sannyasin, had donated for the purpose of building Lotus, we would go to the lake, this gorgeous lake. There was a dam, there was a fabulous waterfall, and it was going to be on the borders of this lake because he always said Lotus had to be by the water. And then, it was decided to have it in Virginia instead. But an area was being cleared where that was going to be, and Gurudev decided from the, so to speak, beach area, wasn't really, where we would go into the water, that he was going to take this little boat. I think it was an inflatable, sort of raft with 2 oars. And he was going to row from there a few hundred yards to the site, which was upriver from here. Still wide, expansive water. So he started rowing along. I was a confident swimmer, and I guess Brahma was too. I haven't compared notes. Yeah, I guess he was. And we both started swimming, and I'd done a lot of swimming, so I was very, that wasn't a problem. So we started swimming after him because, again, he was away from the madding crowd of our brothers and sisters. And it seemed like a nice opportunity. So we started swimming. And we compared notes afterwards, and we both noticed a very strange thing, because we were swimming for all we were worth to keep up with him, not sprinting exactly, but it was a good swim because he could go much faster in the boat. And every time that when you're swimming the crawl, your head isn't up looking ahead of you. It's looking to the side. So you'd have to stop a little bit and raise your head and look up and stop to see where he was and continue to follow him. He didn't say where he was going in particular, by the way. So we were just following him. So when we compared notes later, we both noted that every time either one of us raised our heads and looked at Gurudev, he was still quite far ahead. We couldn't catch up with him. And he was always sitting back in the raft and not rowing, like just totally relaxed like this. And then we would start swimming again and raise our heads, and he would be always further ahead, sitting back, not rowing. So another one of those quaint miracle stories. And even that, when we got there, he decided, well, I ought to give, it seems to me, I ought to give them something to do. So he got to the opposite, the site where Lotus would have been if it had been there, that had been partially cleared. And he asked us, he gave us an assignment, which was really sweet because, we didn't even know why we were there. And he said, go, climb up onto the shore and go stand, in the cleared area there so that I can see from here where Lotus would be. So I thought that was incredibly sweet. So we dragged ourselves out of the water and up into the woods and stood, as living lotuses, I guess. so that Gurudev could have that important visual of what Lotus would look like from the water if it was 2 Jewish guys standing in the middle of the woods in their dripping swim trunks. In no particular order again, on another Father's Day, so we had the Torah story. Gurudev, had sent Gurudev a Father's Day card, and he came to satsang a few, maybe the same day, maybe it was a few days later, I think. And he liked the card that I sent him. So he said, let me read you this card that I got from Paraman, he said to everybody. And it said, it extolled the Father. It was, by the way, it was a commercial card, like Hallmark, not Hallmark, but some humorous commercial card. And it extolled the Father and gave all these great qualities of the Father, and all these great qualities. And then when you opened it, it said, like Father, like Son. And he read this and he loved it. And I was really embarrassed. Obviously, I thought it was a big joke to send that to him. And so when he finished reading it, I said, wishful thinking, Gurudev. And he just immediately, quite intensely, looked at me and said, and it always will be with that kind of thinking. So talk about teaching events. Yeah, he wasn't a big fan of us putting ourselves down in any way. He wanted us to be lions. Here's a story that kind of captures the crazy swirl, at least for me, that often went on. Gurudev was going to give a big lecture in Washington, D.C. In those days, I was in the Washington, D.C. IYI in the early 70s, a little later after Berkeley and after the first Yogaville. And so we were getting ready for his lecture, and we had rented a nice car because the Institute car wasn't suitable to pick up Gurudev at the airport, to take him to the hotel that he would stay in, to take him to the lecture, to take him back to the hotel. And we've got people from the New York Institute and many other places are there helping us set up for this lecture, and it's going to be this big program, and everyone's buzzing around, great karma yogis, and it comes time, it's getting close to the time when I should go and be ready to pick up Gurudev, and I want to have plenty of time to do it. So I reach in my pocket. We've been working hard at the church, getting everything set up, getting a chair and decorations and flowers. And there's always many more details than you would imagine, sound and lights, and lots of folks working on it. I reach in my pocket, and the keys to the rented car, the fancy rented car, I can't find them. And I start checking all my pockets, like you do, and I check them again and again. And I did it well in advance, so there was no need to panic. So I think I probably waited a minute or two and then started to panic totally after checking all the pockets again and again. And I started frantically searching everywhere. And then I said, maybe... I can't remember why I thought that there might be another set of keys at the Institute. I was just desperate. I was just trying anything. I borrowed a Washington devotee's car. I don't know whether she's here tonight. I don't see her on this first screen. And this might be a painful memory because she didn't want to lend me her car. Well, it turns out with very good reason. So please, you've got to give me your car. I have to run over there with me. I got to see if I can find these keys. I got to do something. We have to pick up Gurudev. This is a disaster. So she lent me her precious car, and it was a very nice car. And I got out in the car, and I drove many cars for many years, including many standard shifts, and it had the shift lever on the steering wheel, which is a little unusual, but I'd done that many times. And she was very hesitant, but there was nobody else who had a car there. And so I really pressured her to lend it to me. And to make a long story short, the shift lever came off in my hand and dangled down like a broken limb flopping around. And I had to find some other way to get there and assure the person that the Institute was going to, pay for the repair and all of this. And somehow I got back to the Institute, which was, miles away, didn't find the keys there, came back, walked back into the church. And one of my brothers, who lived I can't remember where he lived in those days, but he was a very kind of imposing figure who I felt quite inferior to in many ways, was standing up there on the stage where Gurudev was going to be speaking soon. And I thought that everyone, and maybe they could clearly see that I was completely losing my mind. And he just calmly turned and he said, "Are you looking for these?" And he held up these keys and waved them around. And I thought, oh, God, he sees what an idiot I am and he's ridiculing me. This is just my brother, not Gurudev. It turns out, I'll jump ahead and just tell you that I mentioned all this to him afterward, and nothing could be further from the truth. This shows how the mind influences things. He had just found these keys and just picked them up and said, "Are you looking for these?" That's all that he did. He didn't think anything of it. So later that night, after Gurudev's talk, we took him back to, I think it was the Mayflower Hotel, a nice hotel in D.C., and we'd gotten him a little room with a kitchen. And I'm telling you this just to give you the flavor of the insanity of some of these encounters in those days. Lots of teaching events. And Jagadamba and I it had a little kitchen right off the entryway. And then there was the bedroom. And Gurudev was relaxing in the bed, and Jagadamba and I were trying to cook an Indian feast out of basically nothing. we had nothing. We were trying to make upma, which we knew he liked, the South Indian dish, in a Pyrex measuring cup. Where did we even get the idea or have some ingredients with us and think that we could pull this off without enough pots and everything? And the measuring cup exploded on the little grill, and food was scattering, and we were lying on the floor with our feet extending into the hallway, which he could see from the bedroom. It was you get the picture. It was like a Marx Brothers movie. It must have been so entertaining to him. Somehow we managed to put something together and offer him something to eat after the lecture. And then Gurudev said he wanted me to confirm his airline reservations for the next day. So again, Columbia University, not, I actually, had considerable academic honors throughout my academic career. I should be able to do this. So I call the airline. He gives me all the details. But try doing this with Gurudev sitting there right across from you. And the simplest things like breathing or standing or sitting or writing a note become exceedingly difficult. But I still would have done really well, except that Gurudev started doing this thing, which I've been guilty of for years, which is that I'm on the phone talking to the operator, and I hesitate to say barking because the guru doesn't bark. The root of mantra is the guru's words. So these are all mantras, but they sounded a little bit like a little insistent, let's say. He's giving me like lots of instructions while I'm trying to talk to this airline reservation line. And I can't even think. And he's constantly interrupting the flow, and I'm trying to get the information, confirm the reservation. I get through all of that. And it's finally time to leave so that he can rest that evening. We're going to come back at an assigned point in the morning. And as we go to walk out the door, Gurudev said, he looked at me and he said, do you have the keys? And he just twinkled his eyes and smiled. And it doesn't stop there. Wait, there's more. Just to capture the flavor of these days, at least for me. It was like a constant disaster movie. The next day, I'm driving him to the airport. Washington has 2 major airports. Not as many as New York, but still enough. So you've got Dulles, which is way far out, and you got National, which is in close. And we had plenty of time to get him to National. And remember, I'm the one who confirmed the reservation. And just as I'm taking the exit to National Airport with plenty of time, no way there was enough time to go to the other airport. He says, is this the right airport? And I made one of those calculated decisions. Now, you may say, oh, Paraman, you just lied. Why, to protect your ego. Maybe so. But at the time, it seemed like the logical thing to do. I made this calculation in less than a half a second. I said, well, there's no point showing any doubt here, because I realized that in that wild confirmation with Gurudev, a constant stream of mantras coming at me in the form of instructions, that I hadn't actually asked whether it was National or Dulles or confirmed that. But in that split second, I figured, well, we've got time to go to National. We're getting off the exit right now. Otherwise, we're definitely going to miss the flight. So he said, is this the right airport? And I said, yes, Gurudev. And he went, let's hope so. And as if that wasn't enough, there was this big silence. And then he said, is there a helicopter we could get from here if we need to get over to Dulles quickly? And I said, I don't know, Gurudev. So that was the craziness, which reminds me of this was quite the visit, as you can see. So it seems like those tap, tap, booms didn't stop with first meeting him. If only you could just break the coconut once and be done with it for good. On the other hand, I will say that in my heart of hearts, I feel like I can only speak for myself, but I actually feel like for all of us that it was over. It was over. Probably before we even knew that we'd met him. It was over. The whole thing is over. The awakening is inevitable.
Was it the right airport?
It was the right airport. Yes, it was the right airport. By the way, another airport story while we're on the subject of airport. A lot of these are airport scenes. On another occasion, we had just had lunch with Sant Keshavadas, and right before he was to be seen off, we go to the airport after this big, wonderful Indian feast, and that I got the privilege to be at. And we come into the airport, and Gurudev gives me an assignment, much like he was kind enough to give Brahma and me an assignment. It's like, you're standing here, why don't you I'll give you something to do for your own good. So he gave me the assignment to get him some ginger ale. He didn't like a lot of different sodas, as far as I know. It seemed to be ginger ale is what he liked if he was going to have soda. So we just had this huge feast, and this again was in Washington, in National Airport, a big airport, and I know it's not hard to get ginger ale. So I went, yes, Gurudev. And I go rushing off, and I'm looking for restaurants, and I'm looking for places that might, and then I quickly think, and nobody has ginger ale, and I quickly think, well, You know, I'm bright. This is easy. This is like a little detective problem. Who will always have ginger ale? A bar. What do you find in airports? Bars. Plenty of bars. There's always bars because people always want to drink before they go on the plane. So in all of National Airport, I go from bar to bar to bar. They all have to have ginger ale. You know that, right? It's not enough that none of the restaurants or snack bars or little, grocery newsstand stores have ginger ale, but none of the bars has a ginger ale. And I came back because I couldn't really imagine, for some reason, I couldn't imagine taking him like a Coca-Cola or something like that. So I came back with orange juice. Orange juice. And I said, I'm so sorry, Gurudev. I couldn't find any ginger ale. I brought you orange juice. And he looked at it and he gave me, he was very practical. He was always teaching. He was always thinking of our benefit. He looked at that and taught me something that I've never forgotten to this day, which is he said, another meal. In other words, he wanted a refreshing little watery beverage, and I had brought him another meal. Yeah, orange juice. Yeah. So, but that's what I mean by these clever little supernormal powers to make all the ginger ale disappear from a large metropolitan airport. I mean, that's not easy. And to me, so much more impressive than doing something self-aggrandizing. Why not do something that could, dare I say, torture? Or what I mean is enlighten one of your students. So that's what he did. How are we doing on time? Oh my goodness. Well, that flew by. I don't feel like I just barely got started. I'll leave you with one. I'll tell you, just so that you come back next time, I'll tell you my favorite vision dream of all time, even though it's a few minutes late, if you indulge me. This is short. So this dream just started, boom, right in the middle, the way many dreams do, and it's definitely vision dreams. And when I say vision dream, if you've had a vision dream, you know that that's what it is. I don't know how to define it, but you know immediately. And in this dream, it's just boom, I'm just there with Gurudev. He's sitting on the edge of a bed, like in a hotel room, much as he was when I had to confirm the reservation. And, he's sitting there in his robes. And I just go straight over to him and I grab him by the shoulders, which, obviously something I would never do. I grab him by the shoulders like this, my face to his. I lean in and I say, "What is it?" And he looks back at me and he says, here's what he says, and then I'll describe what's happening simultaneously. He says, "You will know that. You will know that." He says it once. And while he says this, he's the one who taught us that there are two types of tears. Tears of sorrow come from the inside corners of the eyes and taste salty and bitter, he said. Go know. I mean, what you learn from the guru. And tears of joy come from the outside corners and are sweet. So while he's saying, "You will know that," tears of joy are flowing from the outside corners of the eye. And they, instead of being tears, they're diamonds. They're like crystallizing from liquid into diamonds within an inch or so. And then they get into his gray beard. And as the diamonds go through his gray beard, it's like the hairs of the beard are like harp strings, and they make this celestial music going through the beard. So I wish you a beautiful vision dream like that. That was one of the greatest initiations I ever had from him. And good night to you all, and looking forward to our session next week. And how nice it's Guru Purnima month. Om Shanti, Shanti, Shanti. Jai Gurudev, Jai, Jai, Jai. Oh, and I have a recommendation. Go to the Yoga Wisdom podcast and listen to the latest post that was put up, which is a chant of to Nataraj by one of the greatest Carnatic singers, and it's all about Nataraj being the beloved of Gurudev. Magnificent. And I'll see you all next time. Om Shanti.